Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans. Time for your daily dose of insanity. Over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast with your hosts, J.R. Handley and me, Chris Winder. Just two nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. Without further ado.
All right, so today we have as our special guest CJ Carella, who grew up in South America and bounced around assorted parts of the U.S. After over 20 role-playing books for such companies as Palladium Books, Steve Jackson Games, and Eden Studios. He turned his hand to fiction in assorted genres, from superhero alternative history to horror and science fiction. When not writing, CJ enjoys gaming, computer and tabletop specifically, reading and fighting crime, mostly by yelling at kids to get off his lawn. I approve of that, by the way. He does not enjoy long walks on the beach unless said beach has a partially buried Statue of Liberty. He was recommended to us by a fan of the show, Logan Scott, who's also another author and combat veteran. So thank you when you listen, bud, for making this thing happen. Today, Chris is not able to be here. He's fighting those germs we talked about last week from the kids at the school he works at. Dang, germ factories got him. So we apologize for that. But yeah, so it's just going to be me and CJ today, or CJ and I should say. I know my editor listens too. And then as far as how we met, I've seen his books floating around on Amazon, but I hadn't bought any of them yet. My Honor Harrington fan club reading challenge had me prioritizing authors who were also members for the extra points. Hey, I'm competitive. What can I say? So when I was taking Mil SF, talking about military science fiction with my friend Logan, he berated me for not having read CJ's works, so I did, and now I'm hooked. So there we have it. This is going to be recorded as a two-part episode. Part one, we'll talk specifically about the RPGs that he has written, and then part two, which will be aired on the Wednesday following publication, will be specifically talking about the his written novels as opposed to. So if some of the questions seem a little bit repetitive, bear with us because he's answering from both perspectives. So without further ado, I've looked at some of your titles for your RPGs, and I see that you have urban fantasy, Lovecraftian fantasy, and science fiction. Of the three, I found more titles by you that are science fiction than any other. So what is it about science fiction in particular that you love?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Now, as to science fiction, I guess I must blame my upbringing. My father was a huge science fiction fan. He had a huge collection of all the classics, your Asimov, Clarke, Heinlein. So I grew up reading those. And of course, watching TV, I got to watch Star Trek dubbed in Spanish, growing up in Venezuela. And I'm also old enough to have watched the original screening of Star Wars Episode 4.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm that old.
Well, you must have watched it as an infant, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I wasn't old enough to shave or anything, but I was old enough to appreciate it. That's for sure.
That's outstanding. Well, normally I ask the dreaded religion question. So, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly? Had you worried for a second?
How about we call them the Holy Trinity and leave it at that?
So a diplomat too. I like it.
There you go. Yeah, I think they all fulfill different needs in what I like to see in science fiction. So I enjoy all three.
Okay, I actually do too. I started with Star Wars, but it was actually with the what is now the books that are considered legend rather than canon. And then my mom was like, "Well, why don't you just watch the movie?" Because I was homesick and I was waiting for my broken glasses to get fixed. So I was like, "Well, I can't read the books without the glasses," because my mom was like convinced it would make my eyes go cross. So she's like, "Just watch the movie." So and then it was all downhill from there. Or uphill, I guess, depending on perspective.
Yeah.
So what is your first memory of watching, reading, or playing specifically games in the science fiction genre?
Well, again, I'm dating myself here, but the first science fiction RPG I bought was Star Frontiers, which
Okay.
came out around 1983 or thereabouts. It was sort of like a Star Trek like game. You had like all the different races and the gadgets and so on and so forth. Um, it was a nice little game. I stole a lot of material from it for my GURPS game, which is what I usually play. Besides that, the Star Wars RPG was a huge influence.
Okay.
And yeah,
So, of the two, which one was your favorite, the Star Wars RPG or the Star Frontiers?
oh, Star Wars definitely. Yeah, it had a great cinematic feel to it. Made you feel like you were part of the movie.
Okay. I've played. I think I mentioned this to you offline, but I've played 2 sessions of Dungeons and Dragons, the second edition, and then the Dungeon Master moved, and life sort of got busy. 'Cause I live in a Navy town, so everyone's constantly rotating in and out if they're affiliated with the military, and so. But I've missed it so much because it was so many great ideas. You could just toy with them in your head for your own stories. That I'm looking into teaching myself how to be a dungeon master and starting my own group.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm actually running a game via Skype with people across the country, so it's getting easier to do it nowadays.
So that's something I wondered about, because I know Nick Cole is a friend of the show, plays a game on Skype as well for Dungeons and Dragons. So having done them in person and done them on Skype, do you feel like you lose something doing it on Skype?
Yeah, it's not, I mean, definitely it's not the same as having people across the table from you, but it's close. I mean, it's a lot better than the alternative, which was, playing by chat, which takes forever because everybody's typing at the same time and whatnot. And of course, even going back even further, playing by mail, that just didn't work.
Yeah, I could see that, especially when certain letters got lost, or if you didn't like the answer, you could say it got lost.
Exactly. So yeah, but yeah, Skype is better than nothing, and it does help people who can't come together actually get some game.
Okay, now when you play the tabletop games, do you use the miniatures or maps or anything, or just the paper and pen?
Sometimes I'll break out the minis, especially if it's like a complicated fight where you need to really make sure everybody knows where everything is. But most of the time, we just like talk about it.
Okay, that's one of the things I've been researching myself for. I'm a visual enough person. I learned all of the tactics I was taught that I sort of incorporate into the writing and the gaming and all of that from Sand Tables, which is the military basically version of tabletop gaming, where it's like the 3D. Well, they call it Sand Table because it used to be made of sand on a box that had basically a table where the sand box was lifted, and you could shape the sand to be the terrain to match it, and then people would throw in model trees and cars and buildings and whatnot to represent the space where you'd be doing your mission. And so I do that. I find that helps me visualize things a little better. So,
yeah.
But when you do the minis, do you buy like the pre-made stuff, or do you make them your own, or just sort of whatever's handy?
Well, it used to be when my ex-wife used to love painting miniatures, so I got a lot of those from her. But more recently, I just grab whatever I have. I even have some old HeroClix miniatures from from the old game, and I just like have here. You be Wolverine, and you be Colossus, and that's it.
I like that. It's whatever's handy.
Yeah, it's very informal.
When I use it for my writing, I use the little green army men and Legos. I mean, that's really all you're doing is you just want to be able to see what the corridors would be and what you'd see from what angle. And I mean,
exactly, whatever works.
It doesn't have to be fancy. So how did your love of gaming translate into writing and designing your own RPGs?
Well, it's funny. I mostly wanted to be a writer, just a fiction writer. So I was doing all this gaming, and my then girlfriend, eventual wife and ex-wife, she said, "Well, you like gaming so much, you're getting rejections from all the magazines with your fiction. Why don't you try some? Why don't you submit something to one of the role-playing magazines?" I said, "Well, yeah, I do spend a lot of money on this crap. Might as well see if I can get some money back." I wrote an article for a role player magazine by Steve Jackson Games. Had like some like rules for superheroes. At that point, they didn't have a superhero game, and some martial arts stuff. I taken karate when I was a teenager, and I always been a big fan of martial arts movies. So I came up with some ideas, some little rules, using like movie tropes in the game. They didn't like the superhero stuff, but they liked the martial arts stuff. They published that, and then they called me and say if I was interested in writing a source book, and that was my first game book.
So for the karate stuff, I grew up in the age of Chuck Norris. So I still remember taking karate lessons at Chuck Norris Studios, where every building had a little cardboard cutout of him and his gi.
Oh, that's great.
So what is the you think the single largest influence on your development of games when you write them?
Well, game-wise, I would say Steve Jackson Games. Their little generic universal role-playing system was the one that caught my imagination. I played D&D for a while and Gamma World, another ancient game. But GURPS sort of like grabbed me because it felt more realistic and at the same time very flexible. Let me mix and match things, which is something I enjoy doing. Throwing a little horror in science fiction or a little science fiction in fantasy, that sort of thing.
Okay. And Gamma World, that's a sci-fi one? I'm thinking, I've heard it before. Yeah,
it's sort of like an post-apocalyptic setting, but it's very gonzo. You have like mutant animals, you have weird rules for telepathy and whatnot. It was a fun game.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out. And all of the games and magazines that he mentioned, I'm keeping a running tally for all of you listeners. And I will list all of that in the show notes with links if you want to investigate it on your own. And then at the end of the episode, CJ will give us how you can find him. And that'll be in the show notes as well. So if it's stuff that he wrote and you're interested, he can help you track that all down. So how, when you're writing your game development, how do you set up your character classes? Do you just sort of use the preset stuff, or do you make your own?
Well, most of the games I play or I run tend not to have character classes. They're more like point-based systems. So you sort of like are given a set amount of character points, and you use them to buy the traits that you want for your character. So if you want a mage or a priest, you buy the mage or priest package and so on and so forth. But you can mix and match. You can have a magician who knows how to use a sword or whatever. Obviously, you're not going to be as good as a dedicated swordsman or a dedicated magician, but it sort of balances out.
Okay, so when you write it as a player, what's your favorite class or breakdown of if you use the point system? How do you prefer to play?
Well, I try to get jack of all trades types. People who can do some fighting and might have a utility ability on the side, like either healing or magic or something along those lines.
Okay.
So I get like a bard, but like more like of a badass bard than the ones on D&D.
Yeah, I noticed that about the D&D ones. I always like the sword and shield kind of combo because it sort of fits my personality. So the one D&D game I was in that we met for 2 sessions was using the D&D, I think, version 2. And so when we did the character traits and I rolled, I got like a 1 for intelligence. So she let me re-roll and I managed a 3. So okay. Yeah, my characters always somehow end up just the dumb jock, which is funny because that's not me.
Well, that's the cool thing about role playing. You can step out of your comfort zone and do something different.
Yeah, I have found that there is some overlap though with personality traits of who you people are and the characters they've built. So the game we played, I had a friend of mine that was in. She's a real life paramedic, and then she's going to nursing school. So of course her character was the healer. You know, the veterans were all that were in the group because there were a couple Army guys in with us. Were all the warrior classes. Although I wonder what that says about people that choose to be the thief. I don't know. So
yeah, sometimes you get some disturbing insights into people.
So in the in-game combat for the games that you write, and you can answer how you play as well. How do you decide how that's going to work? The rules and guidelines as far as like the way to make your RPGs different from the others, or your game different from the others.
Yeah, well designing wise, I like the simulation element. You know, try to make it feel maybe not realistic, but at least somewhat real. Something that people who watch movies even can say, well, okay, that makes sense. Um, but also keep it simple enough that it can flow and you don't get bogged down on detail or figuring things out. I figure if you have to open the book in the middle of a fight to determine what's going on, you've probably failed as a game designer.
I can agree.
Go ahead.
I was just say I absolutely agree with that. That's one of the things that at least version 2 was so confusing for someone who hadn't played before that we had to keep going. So I can definitely appreciate the simple factor, especially for noobs.
Oh yeah. And the idea is make it fun, make people get excited, and you know when they're rolling their dice, they know what's going to, you know, what might or might not happen, and they have get invested on the outcome.
Absolutely. Now, when you play your games, because you were talking about setting the mood with the having fun and keeping it cinematic and realistic. So when you play, do you get music in the background for mood, or do you just go with it?
I've done it a couple of times, but yeah, most of the time it's just a bunch of guys around the table, just talking. Sometimes we stop in the middle of a game and start, talking about other stuff. It's very informal.
Okay. So when you play, do you prefer? And you've mentioned that you use the miniatures sometimes, but when it comes to actually playing, do you prefer the miniatures or just the paper and the dice for your gaming?
I guess it depends on the kind of game. I've played some very combat-oriented games, and for those, it was nice to have a nice little square grid. I had one laminated, and I could use those markers and erase stuff as things changed. So we could get very tactical. As of late, the more role-playing oriented games, it's just the paper and the dice.
Okay. I was trying to decide myself how to go, but I think even just when you describe like the map, it doesn't necessarily have to have the grid, but if you have a map of like whatever kingdom or whatever, just so you can visualize, oh, okay, well, I want to go here. This is how we would go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It does help you visualize things. And having a nice map of the game world is always great, because then you can tell people, well, this is it's going to take you this long to get there, and you can see on the map, yeah, that it makes sense.
Now, when you do your map, is there any special program you use to make it, or just hand sketch it on paper?
Or now I'm just being lazy and just sketching things down. I bought a program years ago, and it was I even forget the name, and it was pretty good, but sometimes it took me longer to get through the program than it would have just me writing something down on a piece of paper.
Now, because I need the visuals when I do the writing, I've made maps. The CC3 combat, or no, it's listed as CC3. It's a campaign cartographer. It's actually pretty user friendly, so it's really easy to use, and you can download the whole thing. They run sales periodically, but they have like just a dungeon crawl map where you can design it specific, and you can buy it a la carte. I'll get you the link for that if that's something you want to take a peek at.
Oh yeah, because I've actually been, I might actually use it for my current novel, because having a decent map of my world is probably a good idea.
Well, for the novel writing stuff, it gives it to you, I believe, as a JPEG, so you could actually use that in your books. And yeah, I'll get you that link when the show's over, and I'll put it in the show notes for the listeners, because it helps. And then because you own the JPEG, it's not like copyrighted because you're designing it within the program. Like you could go to Kinko's or whatever the equivalent is, and you could actually print one up poster size if you wanted.
Very cool.
What is your favorite? Obviously, you're biased. You love your own stuff. But if it wasn't your own game, what is your favorite RPG that you've ever played?
Probably, I'm gonna go back to GURPS. It's a very, it's a little complicated for newbies, but it's a decent system. It covers a lot of different genres. There is a lot of material out there, a lot of movie and book adaptations for it. So there is a lot of stuff that's available for it. It's a very nice, well-rounded system.
Okay. Now, if let's see. Oh, here it is. All right. So we've mentioned that he's written several RPGs, and I think it would help if I give a list. I probably should have done that in the beginning, but this is a learning curve for everybody. But he's done the GURPS martial arts book. He's written GURPS War Against the Couture. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Couture, I think. But I wouldn't. Don't swear by it.
He did GURPS Voodoo, The Shadow War, Mercenaries for Palladium's multi-genre RPG Rifts, Pantheons for the same Megaverse for Palladium's multi-genre Rifts. He did the Rifts Manhunter RPG. He's written his own. It's CJ Carella's Witchcraft RPG. Armageddon's The End Times, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Terra Primate. Now, Terra Primate, is that along the lines of like Planet of the Apes kind of vibe?
It's exactly along the lines of Planet of the Apes.
Okay, I was wondering because you mentioned long walks on the beach if the Statue of Liberty is covered in sand. So, and before I forget, he has Secrets of the Ancient is the final RPGs that he's written. So of all those RPGs, what was the most fun for you to write?
Well, I have to go with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love the show. Was a huge fan. When Eden got the license, I was pretty much in nerd heaven.
Now, did you have to work with Joss Whedon? I think he was the director of the show at the time.
No, I never got to see, speak, or communicate in any way with any members of the production cast or anybody. Actually, nobody at all, because my editor worked with the license department. I never got to see anyone. Man.
If you're going to do stuff like that, that would be like a cool perk.
Yeah, I know. Like the owner of Eden, actually, I think he got to meet Amber. I forget the girl who played Willow's girlfriend, and I'm forgetting her name. So I'm just like suffering for senile dementia. I guess.
Did you base the game off the movie or the TV series it followed?
Oh, the TV series.
Okay.
I basically watched like the entire. At that point, I think they had like 5 seasons. I watched every episode multiple times, taking notes, and tried to make the game feel as much as the TV show as possible.
Okay. Have you seen the movie though?
Oh yeah. I saw the movie. Back in the day. Actually, when it came out in theaters, again, I'm very old.
The death scene at the end has to be one of the most iconic in movie cinematic history, where he just spends like 15 minutes kicking the wall. If you haven't seen that, people, you should just check that death scene out on YouTube or something. It's hilarious. So
yeah, I mean the movie itself is not great, but yeah, it has its moments.
So we're gonna pause real quick before we continue the interview for a word from our sponsor.
They picked a fight with the wrong species. A nation at war, the United Stars of America, born in the conflagration of an unprovoked alien attack, the newest entrant to galactic politics took the few crumbs of hypertech gifted to it and ran with them, soon expanding over dozens of star systems and establishing a wide trade network protected by its powerful navy and the dreaded warp marines. In a fight to the death, a single Marine platoon tasked with protecting an embassy on a hostile alien planet, an embassy and the fragile human enclave around it, that soon finds itself surrounded by armed mobs. Can the Marines at a ragtag band of civilian and Navy personnel survive long enough to be rescued?
All right. Well, thank you for that episode sponsorship today. But now we're going to get back to talking to CJ Carella. So what advice would you give for the aspiring RPG creator?
All right. Well, first off, brutal honesty: do not quit your day job. At least based on my experience outside a few big companies and a couple middle-sized ones, this is an industry for hobbyists. It's not going to make you a fortune. It's not. In most cases, it's not going to even pay you a living wage. That's the downer part of the of my advice. Now, from a design thing point of view, play a lot of different games. Get a feel for what other people have done. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. And concentrate on providing a fun experience for the players, because that's the only reason they're going to be buying anything that you produce.
Okay. So the market is obviously changing for RPGs. I've seen a lot of, and sorry, this was an ad-libbed question. It wasn't in the prep that we sent you, but I've seen a lot of Kickstarters for RPG games. So is that something you think is going to change the industry? Maybe let the creators have more of a living wage, or do you think that's going to make a difference?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, I had it. I had something. I wrote something for that very point for one of the questions below. But yeah, Kickstarter makes a huge difference. Patreon as well. It gives indie writers a lot of extra choices that they didn't have before. And actually, that was part of the advice I was going to give. Yeah, Patreon and Kickstarter are your friends. They're the only way for somebody who doesn't have a lot of credits to his name to start getting a little bit of income and building an audience.
Okay. So when new people are writing their RPGs, do you recommend they start from scratch or try to write in existing game universes?
I would say try to collaborate in something that already exists to get your name out there. Don't do anything for free. That the crap about exposure is crap. You can die of exposure. But try to get some credits. Start with the smaller companies. Maybe see if you can write an adventure or help. Get some credits as playtester. Just get your name out there, and then eventually enough people will see your work, and you can then try to launch something on your own.
Now, when you do the writing in existing worlds, is that something that's easy to get them to agree to, or do you have to jump through a lot of hoops?
Well, it depends on who owns the intellectual property. Some people are very good about sharing things. A lot of gaming companies do, share game rules or let people use their game rules as extras in an existing role-playing game, and others are a lot more particular about.
Okay. Now, the next part of the show, we've mentioned in the beginning that we were going to do a 2-part show where we're going to talk about his Warp Marine series, because I've read the first one and it was awesome, and I'm getting ready to start the rest of the series. But is there any plans for you to write an RPG for your Warp Marine universe?
I would love to. Right now, I haven't given it too much thought. I tried to do a couple of role-playing oriented things for the first series of novels I produced, and they didn't do so well, so I've been a little shy about it. But hopefully in the future I might be able to try some.
Now, would that be something, because if somebody approached me, I'm going to say yes, just because I think it'd be cool, and I don't have the dog in the fight, so to speak. Whereas you, having written RPGs, is that something you would feel if someone approached you that you would be willing to let someone else do? I'm just curious, or are you too attached because you wrote them yourselves?
No, I definitely would entertain an offer for somebody to do the game for me. Because I mean, right now, unless I think I have something that's going to be a surefire hit, I think me writing an RPG would be like taking a pay cut. So it's kind of like yeah, I mean, I don't have I have only so much writing time at my disposal, so I need to concentrate on what's paying the bill.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that your dad was a huge science fiction fan and that you grew up in Venezuela. So is the science fiction community for gaming, the RPG community in Venezuela different than where you're living now?
Well, yeah, it was different in the sense that it was essentially non-existent. It was like my father was very unusual in that sense. He most of his peers didn't read very much at all and hardly read any science fiction. So yeah, I mean, I think things have changed. I know there are more conventions and whatnot in South America. But back when I was growing up, before the advent of the internet and the cell phone, there wasn't much science fiction at all.
Okay. I was just curious because I've made some friends with other writers and other fans of science fiction that are all over the globe now. So I'm always fascinated about how that's varied from country to country. Like I've got a friend that's in Sri Lanka that says it's still the Arthur C. Clarke is what everyone aspires to be like for the sci-fi scene there, as opposed to, what people are doing in the US where I'm at or wherever. It just fascinates me how, the culture you come from influences what you like and what you produce as far as science fiction and RPGs and all of that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, definitely things have changed because I do see a lot more conventions in South America. But yeah, back in the day, it was basically magical realism. I mean, if you like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, you would find his books. But that was about it.
So you think it was mostly the advent of the internet that brought that change about?
I think that the movies have made a lot of inroads. Now with you have the Marvel movies, so there's a lot more exposure to the entire genre.
That makes sense. So now that we've talked about specifically your RPGs, the ones you've written and the ones that hopefully will come out for your Warp Marines, because that could be fun. What games are you currently playing aside from any that you potentially made?
Right now I'm playing a friend's game. He actually wrote his own game system. It's called the Glory Road RPG, and it's actually a class-based sort of D&D like fantasy.
Okay. I will get that from you when we finish. I'll go ahead and get that link for you. Is that for sale anywhere?
Yeah, that's actually available on Drive-Thru RPG.
Okay, so if you haven't heard of that one, you can click the links in the show notes and check it out. His friend will thank you. So what is it about this game that you like so much?
Well, I mean, it's a fun game. It's crunchier than traditional D&D, but it has an interesting magic system. I do like it, and it can be very deadly, which makes for some excitement.
Okay. Now, when you play, do you try to keep the characters alive to keep the game going, or will you kill characters off?
It's a thin line. Sometimes if I have occasionally allowed characters to die when I'm the game master, but I'm not completely averse to occasionally fudging a dice roll here or there, just to prevent a meaningless death. But don't tell my players I said that.
So do you prefer to play or to be the dungeon master, game master?
I like doing both. Being a player is almost relaxing for me because I've been in a situation where most people want me to game master, so I like the idea of just worrying about what my character is doing. So it's, I would say, 50-50.
I know Chris has the theory that the people that are creative love to do the dungeon master. So, although I've gotten, I understand where he's coming from because you get to create the world, the adventure, and all that. But I've met plenty of authors that say, "Nope, I just like to play." So, I don't know. It's always interesting to see how that comes down when we talk to individual players. So, when you do that, the RPG games, do you prefer like the fantasy based, or I know you write specifically like the Mill SF, but when you actually RPG as a player, do you have a preference?
Yeah, I tend to favor either standard fantasy or more urban fantasy. Like I haven't played too many games of Vampire the Masquerade, but that sort of genre.
Okay. The I've heard somebody suggest on a blog that I read, I don't even remember where, but that they wrote fantasy though, but that as the dungeon master, they would create scenarios that they're testing to see how it would play out for their books that they write. So I was wondering if you played science fiction, space themed RPGs and tested things for your Warp Marines books.
Well, haven't done Warp Marines, I have to say, but I did test some things from my previous fiction series in one of my games.
Okay, I think it could be fun, if nothing else, to get sort of like the effect of crowdsourcing ideas.
Oh yeah, and sometimes you do get some insights of like things that you thought were cool when you came up with them, and then when you're running them in the game, you realize, no, that's kind of corny, actually.
Yeah, but sometimes corny has its place. I'm a fan of the cheesy sci-fi. There's a lot of B movies out there that I think are hilarious, and everyone's like, "What are you smoking?" So,
oh yeah.
So with the this is going to be a little bit shorter episode because I think with me not being an expert on RPGs, there are only so many questions I know to ask. But normally we ask at the end, as we're wrapping an episode up, if there are any scientific breakthroughs that you're following. But since we're interviewing you in your capacity as an RPG creator, we wanted to mix things up. So, what is new in the world of tabletop gaming that excites you?
My answer was going to be, well, crowdfunding. Yeah, definitely. Kickstarter and Patreon are they already have to some degree, but they're going to continue to revolutionize the whole industry. At this point, the stores are all dependent on a single major distributor. So that means that if the distributor doesn't pick up your game or doesn't buy a lot of copies, you're pretty much dead in the water. With a Kickstarter, you can get enough people interested to finance your first printing, and even make a profit if you're careful on keeping your costs down. So that's going to be a big difference. You can have a lot of games that aren't going to have mass appeal, but are viable if you can get 500 people or even 200 people to pay for the first copy of your book.
Okay. Now, I know that there's a lot of debate in the writing specifically world about the role of piracy, etc. Is that a huge issue for the RPG side? Since now you have ebooks, you could get the PDF on a Kindle reader instead of having to buy the hardback or paperback book or whatever.
Yeah, that is huge. I mean, you can pretty much, if you're willing to go around and do research, you can probably get free copies of pretty much anything. And I mean, it sucks in some ways. I think I tend to agree with the people who say that most people who would pirate your stuff weren't going to buy it anyway. And at least now they are familiar with your work and might at some point either buy some themselves or even recommend it to somebody who might buy it. But yeah, it's something that happens. I don't love it, but I don't lose any sleep over it.
Yeah, I tend not to think about it too much, but I agree. Well, first off, most of the most of the sites that are selling it are actually just trying to get you to enter your credit card and be a sucker so they can rob you blind. But yeah, I don't know that those people would have bought it anyway. I just wasn't sure how that affected the RPG.
Oh, it's pretty bad. I mean, a lot of people are up in arms about it, and they believe that one reason that sales are flagging is because of piracy. I'm not sure that is the case, but I mean, I can understand why people would be upset.
Absolutely. It's a complicated issue, I think. As the person that, never really favored much in the way of stealing, I definitely understand why people get upset. But at the end of the day, you only have so much time and energy.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you had any game RPG universe created in a science fiction series that you like, what would you pick? One that doesn't exist already. I know that's an on the spot, but you're making me think.
It's hard because they actually they've made so much stuff now that it's almost hard to pick a science fiction show that they haven't made a TV show. A game about it. Let's see, offhand, I would say. I'm blanking on the actual name of the show, but there's a lot of good stuff on the Sci-Fi Channel that I think would make a decent RPG.
Normally, when I answered that, I would have said like the Four Horsemen because I've enjoyed the way they treated the Four Horsemen novels. I've enjoyed the way they treated the mech stuff, or the Galaxy's Edge by Jason Onspach and Nick Cole because I like the way the stormtroopers that actually hit what they're aiming at. But I was trolling Facebook while we were waiting to start the show, and it looks like both of those universes are working on that already. So it seems like all the cool ones, people have already saw the potential and started.
Yeah, see, that's my exact same problem. Yeah, I think Galaxy's Edge would make an excellent RPG. And knowing Nick, I'm sure he had thought about it. I mean, I don't know him personally, but knowing how he markets his stuff, he probably had plans for it even as he was writing the book.
That's a good question. I'll have to. You know what? I'll tell you what. When if that RPG comes out, we'll interview him, and you could be a guest host and pepper him with questions as our expert witness.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
So, well, now it's official. We'll have to do that. But so this is the part of the interview where I ask.